Have you ever recognized a place you've never visited? Or felt a connection to a stranger you've never met? These aren't tricks of the mind. They are fractures in the illusion, clues that your soul has lived before. Ancient philosophers didn't see life as a single thread, but as a spiral. From Pythagoras to the Gnostics, from Hindu sages to early Christians, one hidden teaching echoed across civilizations. The soul is real, and it can never die. In fact, it is a traveler on a sacred mission, and your body is the vessel in which it dwells. This idea has a name. Metempsychosis, the transmigration of the soul, was once the crown jewel of the mysteries, taught in temples, practiced in silence, and later deliberately erased. But why? Why would religions bury this truth? Because a soul that forgets can be manipulated, becoming a slave. But a soul that remembers and returns carries tremendous power. Tonight, we trace the forbidden path of the eternal soul, from the ashes of Eleusis to the shadowed pages of occult manuscripts. This is the lost story of who you were, and who you might become again. Welcome to Agrippa's Diary, the gathering place for mystical seekers. Before we begin, for over 2 years, Agrippa's Diary has been devoted full-time to creating free content on the sacred and often misunderstood subject of esotericism, inspiring millions of seekers and helping many begin the journey within. But now, the channel is going through a difficult time. Some videos are being demonetized or shadow banned simply for speaking truthfully on sacred, initiatory topics. It's becoming harder to keep this work alive in a digital world that rewards quick, shallow content. If you've found meaning here, your support is not just highly appreciated, it's necessary. If these teachings have meaning for you, I humbly ask that you consider supporting in one of the following ways: making a donation via PayPal, joining Agrippa's Inner Sanctum on Patreon, enrolling in the Lost Secrets of Alchemical Symbolism, or picking up merch from agrippasdiary.com. Every gesture, great or small, helps keep this sacred fire burning. You will find all links in the video description or in the pinned comment. Thank you. And now, let us begin. What exactly is metempsychosis, and why has this doctrine persisted across millennia, whispering through the shadows of human spirituality? The term itself reveals much, derived from ancient Greek meta, change, after, and empsychosis, to put a soul into, a process whereby the eternal soul or consciousness transitions from one physical form to another after death. Yet we must be precise in our language, fellow seekers. While often used interchangeably with reincarnation, metempsychosis carries distinct and more profound implications. Reincarnation typically implies a linear progression of the same soul through successive human bodies. Metempsychosis, however, speaks to a grander cosmic circulation, where the soul may inhabit not only human forms, but potentially traverse the boundaries between species, a concept Pythagoras, that enigmatic master of numbers and harmonies, embraced fully. Consider the words of Empedocles, who proclaimed, "For I have already been a boy and a girl, a bush and a bird, and a dumb fish in the sea." This is no mere poetic flourish, but a declaration from one who claimed direct knowledge of his soul's journey through multiple forms. The implications are staggering. If true, the boundaries we perceive between human and animal, between conscious and unconscious forms, may be far more permeable than our modern sensibilities allow. Pythagoras himself built his entire philosophical school around the reality of metempsychosis. His famous prohibition against eating beans stemmed not from dietary superstition, but from the profound belief that these humble legumes might contain the souls of the departed. His disciples reported that Pythagoras once recognized the voice of a deceased friend in the yelp of a dog being beaten. Such was his attunement to the continuity of consciousness across forms. However, perhaps the most eloquent ancient exposition comes from Plato, particularly in his Myth of from the Republic. Here, Plato describes a soldier named who appears to die in battle, only to return days later with accounts of the afterlife realm where souls choose their next incarnations. He said that he saw the soul which had once been Orpheus choosing the life of a swan out of enmity to the race of women. He saw the soul of Ajax choosing the life of a lion, and Agamemnon taking the life of an eagle. Note that in Plato's account, human souls select both human and animal embodiments based on their character and previous experiences, a reflection of true metempsychosis rather than simple reincarnation. This doctrine found fertile ground beyond Greece as well. In ancient Egypt, the concept of the soul, continuing its existence in multiple forms, informed their elaborate funerary practices. The majestic Hindu traditions speak of samsara, the wheel of birth and death, where consciousness migrates, according to karma, across 8.4 million possible life forms. Yet all these traditions converge on a central insight. Consciousness is not generated by matter, but rather employs material forms temporarily, much as we might don and discard clothing. The implications of this understanding radically transform our conception of existence. Death becomes not an ending, but a transition, a doorway through which the eternal aspect of our being passes on its journey toward greater awareness. As we contemplate metempsychosis, we must ask ourselves, if your consciousness has inhabited previous forms, what wisdom might lie dormant within you? What experiences, abilities, and affinities might be explained not by your current life circumstances, but by the accumulated journey of your soul across the expanse of time? The Roman philosopher Plotinus, expanding on Platonic thought, suggested that the soul's choice of subsequent lives reflects its dominant desires and character, that we gravitate toward embodiments that express our true nature. Thus, a soul fixated on power might return as a tyrant, one consumed by beauty might choose the life of an artist, while one developed in compassion might select a life of service. This is not merely abstract philosophy, fellow mystics. The implications transform how we understand ourselves, our relationship to other beings, and the very nature of our existence. For if the doctrine of metempsychosis holds truth, then the boundaries we perceive between ourselves and others, even between species, become far more illusory than we imagined. Indeed, everything would become one. As we transition to exploring how this teaching manifested across diverse cultures and traditions, consider this: the stranger seated beside you, the animal crossing your path, even the plant bending in the wind, all may contain consciousness that has experienced human embodiment, perhaps even consciousness that once knew you in another time, another form. The eternal cycle turns, and we are all, ultimately, travelers on the same great journey. The doctrine of metempsychosis, far from being the isolated teaching of a few Greek philosophers, reveals itself as a golden thread woven through the sacred lore of traditions worldwide. As we trace this thread across continents and millennia, a profound pattern emerges, one that suggests not cultural borrowing, but perhaps a universal insight into the nature of consciousness itself. In the East, the concept reached its most elaborate expression in the Hindu traditions, where it forms the very foundation of spiritual understanding. The Bhagavad Gita addresses this directly when Krishna instructs Arjuna, "As a person sheds worn-out garments and wears new ones, likewise at the time of death, the soul casts off its worn-out body and enters a new one." This is not merely a poetic metaphor, but the cornerstone of an entire cosmological framework. The Sanskrit texts speak of the jiva, individual soul, migrating through countless forms according to its karma, accumulated actions, ascending and descending through 8.4 million possible yonis, wombs or birth forms, from the simplest organisms to the most complex divine embodiments. The Buddhist traditions, while rejecting the concept of an unchanging soul, Atman, nevertheless embrace the continuity of consciousness through successive embodiments. The Tibetan Bardo Thodol, known in the West as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, provides perhaps the most detailed cartography of the soul's journey between lives ever committed to writing. It describes with remarkable precision the experiences of consciousness after death, the intermediate states, and the process of selecting a new embodiment. What is particularly striking, fellow mystics, is that these Eastern traditions developed sophisticated techniques for accessing memories of previous existences. The Buddha himself was said to have recalled all his past lives during his night of enlightenment beneath the Bodhi tree. These are not mere claims, but are accompanied by specific meditative practices designed to pierce the veil of forgetting that typically accompanies birth, which we will discuss later in the video. But let us turn our gaze westward, where the doctrine manifested with equal power, albeit often more secretly preserved. In ancient Egypt, the already mentioned concept of the Bia, the aspect of the soul that could transform and move freely after death, shows remarkable parallels to metempsychosis. The Egyptian Book of the Dead contains spells specifically designed to allow the deceased to transform into various animals and plants. I am the god Amun. I am Re. I am one who can transform into any shape I desire. The Orphic traditions of Greece, those mysterious initiatory schools that predated and influenced Pythagoras, taught that the soul was divine in origin, but trapped in a cycle of rebirths, a wheel of necessity from which philosophical wisdom could provide release. Their sacred writings, largely lost but preserved in fragments and references, speak of the soul as a fallen divinity seeking to return to its celestial homeland through successive lives. The Neoplatonic philosophers, particularly Plotinus, Porphyry, and Iamblichus, systematized these understandings into a comprehensive philosophical framework. Plotinus wrote in his Enneads, "Those who have exercised human capacities are reborn as humans. Those who have lived by sense alone become animals. Those whose lives were solely vegetative become plants." This is not mere speculation, but presented as cosmic law. The soul gravitates toward embodiments that reflect its developed qualities and desires. What is particularly fascinating is how this doctrine was transmitted through initiatory lineages. The Greek mystery schools, those profound institutions at Eleusis, Samothrace, and elsewhere, revealed these teachings only to the properly prepared. Initiates reported experiencing not just intellectual understanding of metempsychosis, but direct recall of previous existences through carefully guided rituals and sacred substances. The Hermetic traditions of late antiquity, that remarkable fusion of Egyptian wisdom, Greek philosophy, and early alchemical science, preserved the doctrine in texts like the Corpus Hermeticum, where Hermes Trismegistus teaches, "No death exists in the cosmos, only dissolution, for dissolution is not death, but the dissolution of a mixture." Thousands of years later, Antoine Lavoisier would declare, "Nothing is lost, nothing is created, everything is transformed." You learned this in school, remember? The thing is, most of us were not ready to understand. Anyway, the soul, according to Hermetic teachings, was on a journey of purification through successive lives, a concept that would profoundly influence both Western esoteric traditions and, surprisingly, early Christian thought. What emerges as we survey these diverse traditions is not merely similar ideas, but strikingly consistent details about the mechanics of soul transition. From the Egyptian weighing of the heart against Maat's feather to the Hindu accounting of karma, from the Greek emphasis on philosophical development to the Buddhist focus on mindfulness at the moment of death, all suggest a coherent understanding of consciousness transcending physical dissolution. How did cultures separated by vast distances and without historical contact develop such similar frameworks? Is metempsychosis merely a comforting story humans tell themselves in the face of mortality? Or does its persistence across time and space suggest something more? perhaps a glimpse of a universal truth about the nature of consciousness itself. As we prepare to explore how this ancient wisdom collided with emerging orthodox religions, consider that the doctrine of metempsychosis may not merely be an artifact of ancient thought, but a fundamental insight into the true nature of your existence, an existence that may span not decades but eons. The collision between the ancient doctrine of metempsychosis and emerging religious orthodoxies represents one of the most profound spiritual suppressions in human history. What was once openly taught in philosophical schools and mystery traditions became dangerous heresy, punishable by exile, imprisonment, or death. Yet the truth, as always, found ways to persist in the shadows. Let us begin with early Christianity, a movement far more diverse and philosophically complex than most modern adherents realize. In its formative centuries, many prominent Christian thinkers embraced forms of metempsychosis, viewing it as entirely compatible with Christ's teachings on spiritual transformation. Origen of Alexandria, perhaps the most brilliant theologian of the early church, advocated a sophisticated understanding of pre-existence and soul development across multiple embodiments. In his monumental work, De Principiis, he wrote, "Every soul comes into this world strengthened by the victories or weakened by the defeats of its previous life. Its place in this world as a vessel appointed to honor or dishonor is determined by its previous merits or demerits." This was no marginal figure, fellow seekers, but one of Christianity's most influential early theologians. Origen directed the catechetical school of Alexandria, wrote prolifically, and developed a comprehensive theological system that saw souls evolving through successive lives toward eventual reunion with God. Why then is this understanding absent from mainstream Christianity today? The answer reveals much about the politics of religious power. In 553 CE, at the Fifth Ecumenical Council in Constantinople, Emperor Justinian, more politician than theologian, engineered the condemnation of Origen's teachings on soul pre-existence and multiple embodiments. This occurred not primarily for theological reasons, but because the doctrine undermined ecclesiastical authority by placing spiritual development in the hands of the individual soul across multiple lifetimes rather than under church control within a single life. The council declared, "If anyone asserts the fabulous pre-existence of souls and shall assert the monstrous restoration which follows from it, let him be anathema." With this proclamation, the doctrine that had flourished openly in the philosophical schools of antiquity was driven underground in Christian lands. Yet, it did not disappear entirely. The Gnostic Christians, those mystics who emphasized direct spiritual knowledge over institutional authority, preserved these understandings in texts like the Secret Book of John and Pistis Sophia. When these communities were violently suppressed, their precious manuscripts were hidden in caves and deserts, not to be rediscovered until our modern era at places like Nag Hammadi. In Jewish mystical traditions, particularly Kabbalah, the doctrine persisted more openly under the name Gilgul Neshamot, the cycling of souls. The Zohar, Kabbalah's central text, teaches, "As long as a person is unsuccessful in his purpose in this world, the Holy One, blessed be He, uproots him and replants him over and over again." Kabbalists developed elaborate understandings of how souls migrate, sometimes occupying multiple bodies simultaneously, or entering a new body temporarily to complete unfinished spiritual work, a concept known as Ibr. Even in Islam, where orthodox teaching rejected metempsychosis, mystical Sufi orders and esoteric sects, like the Druze, preserved aspects of the doctrine, often disguising it in metaphorical language to avoid persecution. What is particularly fascinating, dear seeker, is how the Western esoteric traditions became the sanctuary for this suppressed knowledge during the Middle Ages and Renaissance. Alchemical texts, ostensibly concerned with transforming base metals into gold, frequently employed symbolic language that actually referred to the soul's journey through multiple embodiments. The pelican feeding its young with its own blood, the phoenix rising from the ashes, the Ouroboros serpent devouring its tail, all were coded references to the eternal cycle of the soul. The Knights Templar, before their suppression in 1307, were accused of secretly holding beliefs in metempsychosis. While historical evidence remains inconclusive, esoteric historians have long suspected that these warrior monks encountered and embraced such teachings during their time in the East. During the Renaissance, as classical texts became newly available, the doctrine resurfaced more openly. Philosophers like Giordano Bruno taught metempsychosis explicitly and paid with their lives. Bruno was burned at the stake in 1600, in part for holding that the soul is not born of the body and is not produced from matter, but from without it is infused into the body, and not only is it incorruptible, but it can also transmigrate from body to body. If you're intrigued by the life and legacy of Bruno, I highly recommend Giordano Bruno and the Hermetic Tradition by Francis Yates, available now in a newly restored hardcover edition through Galloglass Books, our sponsor for today's video. This landmark work is one of the most influential studies ever written on Renaissance Hermeticism and the occult philosophy of the time. Yates not only explores Bruno's bold cosmological theories and tragic fate at the hands of the Inquisition, but also reconstructs the vibrant esoteric tradition he emerged from, a world shaped by Neoplatonism, Kabbalah, astrology, and magic. This edition profiles key figures like Marsilio Ficino, Pico della Mirandola, Cornelius Agrippa, Robert Flood, and, of course, Bruno himself, framing their thought within a tapestry of mystical ideas that challenged the orthodoxy of the age. Galloglass has spared no detail in this limited edition. 536 pages printed on luxurious Italian paper, a matte dust jacket over black cloth hardcover boards with antique-style gold foiling, a rounded spine with sewn binding, and rich visual materials throughout. Designed by Max Loeffler and Farzana Razak, only 2,500 copies of this edition exist, and believe me, they are selling fast. To secure your copy of this essential limited edition volume, click the link in the description or head to the pinned comment below. Many thanks to Galloglass Books for supporting today's video. Even within esoteric Christian mysticism, figures like Jacob Boehme developed complex theories of spiritual evolution across multiple lifetimes, carefully couched in orthodox-sounding language to avoid censure. What does this pattern of suppression tell us? Why have institutional religions so consistently rejected or condemned a doctrine that was central to the philosophical systems that preceded them? Perhaps because metempsychosis fundamentally shifts spiritual authority from external institutions to the internal development of the soul across its eternal journey. If your soul has experienced countless lives before this one, and will experience countless more, then salvation becomes not a single moment of confession or conversion, but an ongoing process of spiritual evolution. The priest or pastor becomes less a gatekeeper to heaven and more a temporary guide on an infinite journey. As we prepare to explore how this ancient doctrine has resurfaced in modern thought, consider this. The very teachings condemned as heretical by religious authorities may contain the deepest truths about your nature, truths that threaten not because they are false, but precisely because they are true. After centuries confined to esoteric circles and mystical undercurrents, the ancient doctrine of metempsychosis has experienced a remarkable resurrection in the modern era. This revival began not as a mere echo of ancient teachings, but as a powerful symphony bringing together Eastern wisdom, Western esotericism, and emerging scientific understandings of consciousness. The pivotal moment came in the late 19th century with the founding of the Theosophical Society by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, Henry Steele Olcott, and William Quan Judge. Madame Blavatsky, a remarkable and controversial figure, journeyed to India and Tibet, returning to proclaim a synthesis of esoteric teaching that placed metempsychosis, or reincarnation, as it was more commonly termed, at its very center. In her monumental work, The Secret Doctrine, Blavatsky wrote, "The pivotal doctrine of the esoteric philosophy admits no privileges or special gifts in man, save those won by his own ego through personal effort and merit throughout a long series of metempsychoses and reincarnations." This was not merely academic philosophy, but a direct challenge to the religious orthodoxies of the West. Theosophy spread rapidly across Europe and America, introducing millions to the concept of soul evolution through successive lives. What had been heresy for over a millennium suddenly became a topic of drawing-room conversation among the intellectual elite. Carl Gustav Jung also found himself profoundly influenced by these concepts. While carefully maintaining scientific credibility, Jung's concepts of the collective unconscious and archetypes hinted strongly at the kind of soul memory associated with metempsychosis. In his autobiography, Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung recounted powerful dreams and visions that suggested to him the reality of past life memories. "I had the feeling that I was in the land of the dead. The feeling of unreality was startling, along with the objective clarity with which everything appeared. I had the feeling I was about to enter a dark, subterranean vault, as if I were a dead person." Psychiatrist Ian Stevenson removed the last vestiges of metaphysical caution, embarking on a systematic study of children who appeared to remember past lives. For over 40 years, Stevenson documented over 3,000 cases of children across cultures who demonstrated detailed knowledge of people, places, and events they could not possibly have known through normal means. His meticulous methodology and academic approach made it difficult to dismiss his findings as mere fantasy or suggestion. Consider the case of Shanti Devi, who at age 4 began to recall details of a life in Mathura, India. She provided the name of her former husband, described his home, and even led investigators to a hidden box containing money she had secreted away in her previous life. The details were later verified, and no normal explanation could account for her knowledge. Meanwhile, the Western esoteric traditions underwent a significant renaissance. Organizations like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and numerous others brought metempsychosis back into their initiatory teachings. Dion Fortune, one of the 20th century's most influential esoteric writers, stated plainly in her work, The Mystical Kabbalah, "Each life is a day in the school of the soul. We evolve by means of our experiences during these manifestations." This was no longer hidden teaching, but openly proclaimed wisdom, available to anyone with curiosity and a bookstore. Even more remarkably, the scientific paradigm, once seemingly at odds with such concepts, began to shift in ways that made metempsychosis, at least theoretically, possible. Quantum physics demolished the Newtonian conception of a purely mechanical universe, revealing instead a reality where consciousness and observation appear to play fundamental roles. Erwin Schrödinger, Nobel laureate and one of the founders of quantum theory, was himself deeply influenced by Vedantic philosophy and its conception of consciousness. He wrote, "Consciousness is never experienced in the plural, only in the singular. Not only has none of us ever experienced more than one consciousness, but there is also no trace of circumstantial evidence of this ever happening anywhere in the world." This suggests a view compatible with the ancient understanding that consciousness is fundamental rather than emergent, that it may transcend rather than arise from physical processes, precisely as metempsychosis requires. Dr. Robert Lanza's theory of biocentrism and Dr. Stuart Hameroff and Sir Roger Penrose's orchestrated objective reduction theory have advanced similar paradigms, suggesting that consciousness may exist at quantum levels, potentially independent of specific brain structures, again, precisely what would be required for the transfer of consciousness from one form to another. Even pragmatic clinical research has offered tantalizing evidence. Dr. Brian Weiss, former head of psychiatry at Mount Sinai Medical Center in Miami, began as a skeptic, but was transformed into an advocate of past-life therapy after witnessing remarkable therapeutic results when patients accessed what appeared to be memories of previous existences. What are we to make of this convergence of ancient wisdom and emerging science? Is it merely a coincidence that quantum physics appears to validate concepts once taught by ancient mystics? Or are we witnessing the re-emergence of a perennial truth about consciousness, one that has been periodically suppressed but never fully extinguished? The implications extend beyond mere intellectual curiosity. If metempsychosis is real, then the materialist paradigm that has dominated Western thought for centuries must yield to a more expansive understanding of consciousness. Death becomes not an ending, but a transition. Identity, not a singular phenomenon, but a continuum of experiences across what we perceive as time. What does it mean for you, fellow mystic, if metempsychosis is not merely an ancient philosophical curiosity, but a fundamental truth of existence? How might your understanding of yourself and your spiritual journey transform if your current incarnation is but one momentary expression of your soul's vast pilgrimage through form and time? Let us now turn inward from historical analysis to personal implication, from academic understanding to lived wisdom. First and foremost, the doctrine of metempsychosis radically reshapes our relationship with death. That looming specter that has haunted humanity's consciousness since the dawn of self-awareness loses much of its terror when understood not as an ending but as a threshold. Death becomes less the extinguisher of identity and more the doorway to the soul's next classroom. As the Hermetic axiom states, nothing perishes, everything merely changes form. Yet this is no license for spiritual complacency. Quite the contrary. If your actions, thoughts, and developments in this life shape the quality and character of your next embodiment, then each moment takes on profound significance. The ancient concept of karma is not some remote cosmic accounting system, but the natural principle of cause and effect, operating on consciousness itself. The Rosicrucian teachings express this eloquently. Each soul creates its own conditions, both now and in lives to come. As we sow, so shall we reap, not as punishment, but as the natural unfoldment of causes set in motion. Consider the ethical dimensions this understanding introduces. If the stranger before you might have been your brother, mother, or beloved in a previous incarnation, or might be in a future one, how does this transform your treatment of them? The boundaries that separate self from other grow more permeable, more fluid. Compassion becomes not merely a virtue, but a recognition of the essential unity of all conscious beings, journeying through different forms and experiences. Even more profoundly, metempsychosis offers a framework for understanding the seeming injustices of existence. Why do some souls enter lives of privilege while others face tremendous suffering from birth? The doctrine suggests that these are not random accidents nor divine punishments, but stages in the soul's ongoing journey, opportunities for specific learnings that the soul itself may have chosen before birth. What appears as cosmic injustice may actually be cosmic pedagogy, a perfectly calibrated curriculum for each soul's unique evolutionary path. But perhaps you ask, if I have lived before, why do I not remember these previous existences? The veil of forgetting that descends at birth serves a crucial purpose. Would you be able to focus on the lessons of this life if you carried the full weight of memories from countless previous existences? As Plato suggested, drinking from the river Lethe, the waters of forgetting, is necessary for the soul to fully immerse itself in its new experience. Yet this veil is not impenetrable. Throughout history, mystics and initiates have developed techniques for accessing these deeper memories. Meditation, hypnosis, dream work, and certain initiatory rituals can sometimes pierce the veil, allowing glimpses of the soul's longer journey. The concept of the Akashic records, a cosmic repository of all events, thoughts, and experiences across time, suggests that your previous lives remain accessible, recorded in the subtle substance of universal memory. Advanced adepts report the ability to access these records, reviewing not only their own soul histories, but those of others when spiritually appropriate to do so. For the practical seeker, several approaches may prove fruitful. Regular meditation, particularly on the question, "Who am I beyond this temporary personality?" can gradually thin the veil between incarnations. Dream work, paying special attention to recurring dreams of unfamiliar places, people, or historical periods, may reveal fragments of past life memories bubbling up from the deeper mind. Regression techniques, when conducted by ethical and experienced practitioners, sometimes allow access to what appear to be memories of previous embodiments. Most importantly, patterns in your current life, inexplicable fears, unusual talents, immediate attractions or aversions to certain people or places may provide clues to your soul's longer journey. The child who sits at a piano for the first time and plays with surprising facility may be accessing skills developed in a previous life. Yet we must approach this work with both courage and discernment. The ego, that temporary construct of this particular incarnation, may resist the dissolution of its perceived uniqueness and finality. False memories can be generated by suggestion or imagination. True spiritual growth requires us to navigate between credulity and closed-mindedness. So, as we conclude our exploration of metempsychosis, I invite you to consider one final, profound implication. If your soul has experienced countless previous lives and may experience countless more, then your current identity, your name, nationality, gender, profession, and personality represent but one temporary costume in the soul's grand pageant. You are simultaneously far less and far more than you have believed yourself to be. Less, because your current self is impermanent and transitional. More, because the consciousness witnessing this temporary expression has journeyed through eons and taken myriad forms in its evolution toward greater awareness. This understanding does not diminish the importance of your current life, but rather places it in cosmic perspective. Each incarnation becomes a precious opportunity for growth, service, and awakening. Each relationship, challenge, and joy becomes a thread in the vast tapestry of your soul's evolution. Fellow seekers, as we part ways for now, I leave you with this contemplation. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, consider that you have done this thousands of times before, in different bodies, different eras, different circumstances. We have all stared at the same moon, kings, beggars, and heroes of old. The consciousness that witnesses your dreams has witnessed countless other dreams across the ages, and it will continue its journey long after your current form has returned to dust. The veil may be thick, but the light of truth penetrates even the densest material. Your eternal nature calls to you from beyond the limitations of a single lifetime. Listen carefully to remember who you truly are. Thank you for watching, and until our paths cross again, seek light, speak truth, and keep the flame alight. Hen to Pan.